Folks, I would like to welcome our keynote speaker, Samira Rafaela. She's a European parliamentarian elected from the Netherlands in 2019, part of the Democrat and 66 Party, and a member of the Renew Europe group, a group that is liberal pro-Europe in the parliament. Samira is very important to us, to this audience, because she is the primary rapporteur, which means the person who negotiates with member states on the proposal for the regulation of the prohibiting products made with forced labor in the European Union. So she is that key person with regard to that law, which we will talk about later in the afternoon. She's also active, along with others that we know, in the CSDDD, the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive. And so in many ways, she is crucial to the work of our institute, but also to the audience here that is concerned with labor issues and labor rights in the supply chain. Samira.
Good morning, everyone, and I hope that it's going to be a beautiful day. Last night, I had the pleasure of engaging with already different speakers, a diverse group from different parts of the world, from Boston to Honduras, and let it be known that New York City is a place where more than 200 languages are spoken, a city that unites and connects, just like the Global Labor Institute, a scientific institution that brings people from around the world to get together. The progress of science begins with the sharing of knowledge, expertise, and networks. And today we are guests at the Global GLI Conference, an event where these three components converge: knowledge, expertise, and networking. And in the past few days and leading up to this conference, much has transpired in the European Parliament, the European Commission, and the Council. As you know, these three institutions form the heart of Europe. And today I will focus on the establishment of the new anti-forced labor instrument in Europe, an instrument aimed at combating forced labor. I will discuss the process leading to the position of the European Parliament, the developments surrounding it, the challenges for the coming months, and the way forward. But before delving into the content, I want to express my gratitude to the organization for this fantastic conference, Mr. Jason Judd, and his colleagues, my fellow guest speakers from around the world who have taken the time to be here. And a special thanks to Commissioner DJ Reinders. Thanks to all of you to be here. And it's because of you that we are all here to exchange ideas, share knowledge, and network. Uniting different backgrounds from different parts of the world is a true feat. So thank you, Global Labor Institute. Now on to the substance you have all come for. As politicians, as consumers, and as citizens, we cannot condone forced labor. Therefore, products made with forced labor must be banned from the European market because human rights are not for sale. So the EU is a human rights champion, and we should practice what we preach. In 2024, corporate accountability really is the bare minimum. So we cannot allow for human rights to be violated or our environment to be polluted. And worldwide, according to estimates of the ILO, there are almost 28 million people in a situation of forced labor, also in Europe and also here in the US. But that's the number we know. We might not even know about all the unregistered cases. Vulnerable and marginalized groups such as women, children, ethnic minorities, indigenous peoples are particularly vulnerable to be pressured into performing forced labor. And the upcoming legislation on forced labor is therefore gender sensitive and takes into account the lack of access to complaint mechanisms for these vulnerable groups. Women and girls account for 11.8 million of the total number of people engaged in forced labor, and more than 3.3 million of all those engaged in forced labor are children. And it's the very reason why also the EU will introduce trade and gender chapters and provisions to establish a gender lens that is essential for women in order to combat gendered forced labor. And I'm happy to announce that as rapporteur of the modernized agreement with Chile from the EU side, we will have the first ever gender and trade chapter in a trade agreement soon. The EU wants to become a reliable partner, trade partner for the rest of the world. And we are looking for like-minded partners to do trade with and to close economic partnerships with. And value-based trade via rules-based trade must be achieved, because we need rules to safeguard the values in new trade agreements and to protect our internal market from malpractices. And this is why in recent years, the European Union has worked on and adopted different key pieces of legislation that address corporate accountability. Commissioner Reinders already pointed it out. One of the all-encompassing ones is the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, or CSDDD, easier to say. But there are also the anti-deforestation regulation, the carbon border adjustment mechanism, and of course the forced labor ban regulation, for which I am now the lead negotiator in the European Parliament. And it all started with a group of members of European Parliament asking the European Commission to come with a separate proposal on forced labor, because the situation of forced labor is too specific and too bad, and it's too horrible to only be covered by due diligence. So we are happy that the Commission listened to this and came with a separate proposal. And to give you a short overview of how legislation in the European Union works, we can see it as following. We have the European Commission, take it as an executive branch, proposes a new bill, after which the Council, which is the representation of the all 27 member states, and then the European Parliament, which are the elected representatives of the European people, both negotiate their own version. Thereafter, the three institutions negotiate a final version together, and that will be implemented in the whole European Union, the so-called trilogues. And as a politician, I represent the European Parliament in these negotiations. We are all shocked, all the three institutions, by the images and investigations into the many cases of forced labor worldwide. A clear example is China's terrible treatment of Uyghurs. Quite recently, the Outlaw Ocean Project published that China is forcing Uyghurs to work on their fishing vessels on a large scale and then sell that fish all over the world, including in my own member state, the Netherlands. And this follows countless other examples of how products made with forced labor end up on our shelves. So other cases include Turkmenistan and the reports about the systemic and ongoing situation of forced labor on cotton plantations, and how complex supply chains can still get these products to be imported into the EU. That's a bad thing. So to tackle this immense problem, it is key that we need to transform our trade policy and ensure that products made with forced labor cannot enter or leave our markets, but instead we ban them. So we need to implement our values-based trade, and we need rules. And that is why the product ban is so essential. The products that we ban can be donated to charity in case of perishable products, or otherwise it should be recycled or destroyed. The proposed legislation we are working on is key for removing the economic incentive for companies to engage in forced labor. So together we hope to prevent modern slavery products from entering the European market and protect businesses and the SMEs from unethical competition from companies that do employ forced labor. Because this is what we're constantly trying to explain businesses that are a bit critical. We are like, but you are dealing with unethical competition right now. I mean, as an example, a company that sources from a region where there is systemic use of forced labor will be able to significantly produce cheaper items than a company that wants to do it right and only source from good sources. So there's unethical competition also. To be effective, it is essential that we cooperate with like-minded international partners. Of course, here in the US, there is the Section 307 of the Tariff Act of 1930 prohibiting the entry of products made with forced labor, while more recently, the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act was adopted. And now more countries are following: Canada, Mexico, Australia, and New Zealand. And I believe that we all benefit if we can work together on topics including, but not limited to, the risk indicators, on the sharing of relevant information, and identifying certain improvements. So in the European Parliament, together with my colleagues, I built now on the Commission proposal and made it stronger in certain areas. We made sure that the ban includes a robust database with concluded investigations, so that there is protection for whistleblowers and that there is remediation to victims as a condition to lift the product ban. So remedy needs to take place even though it's a product-based instrument. The UN guiding principles on the business and human rights, for example, are very clear about the right to remedy. But if we take ourselves seriously and if we care about human rights, we can't be satisfied only with banning the product. Then we also need to make sure that victims are compensated, and we understand the difficulty here, but therefore we believe remedy needs to take place as close to the source of where the forced labor happened. The database is, believe, our strongest tool. And this regulation, but especially the database that needs to be publicly accessible, takes away the economic incentive for companies to work with forced labor. Yes, it's a way to shame economic operators, but to mainly protect human lives and consumers from buying products with forced labor. And let's not underestimate the power of the consumers. More and more, we see a strong demand of consumers to produce and sell fair products. So we have also introduced a reversal of the burden of proof for specific sectors in specific regions where there is factual evidence of state-imposed forced labor. This means that companies themselves need to prove that their products are forced labor-free. And this will be key for competent authorities and customs authorities to be able to act quickly when products come from these regions. We have made the text gender responsive and gave extra attention to the intersectional impact of forced labor on minority or marginalized groups in society, such as migrants, refugees, indigenous people, as well as children that are under forced child labor. And finally, we found it very important to have a harmonized approach among the whole EU. So therefore, we have increased the role of the European Commission so that they can harmonize the work of the 27 member states and that they can also conduct their own investigations if necessary on behalf of the whole EU. And it doesn't happen a lot. That's the European Parliament gives even extra power to the European Commission. So I think that's pretty unique. With this text, we have established a strong mandate from the European Parliament that was broadly supported by all the political groups, from the left to the right. Following this mandate, we are now negotiating together with the European Council and the European Commission, as we speak now, to make a final text that needs to be implemented in the whole EU. And it is no secret that the three institutions look at some of the priorities differently. In these negotiations, we are trying now to find out where we can get a landing zone, but we all agree that we should finish this regulation before the end of the mandate. So that means June this year. And the urgency of this regulation is clear. The almost 28 million people under forced labor cannot wait any longer, and we need to take our responsibility. And all in all, this ban will give a powerful impulse to the fight against forced labor and forced child labor around the world. So we indeed have the responsibility and the opportunity to tackle this problem and change the fate of millions of people. And to be successful, we need to work together with our international partners that have similar legislation in place, such as the US. And it's most important for the upcoming time that the US and the EU will exchange on best practices. Take, for example, the database. It's an opportunity to learn from each other, but also to exchange information on, for example, certain products and areas. And given the importance of the multilateral system and multilateral cooperation, we should strengthen the ties also in this regard to protect our values and human lives from forced labor. And this regulation will be an additional means of encouraging everyone to set high standards in terms of the fundamental rights of every human being and of corporate accountability. So we will do this together with other legislation, such as due diligence, our international partners, such as the US, and governments and organizations everywhere. Because only together, I believe that we will succeed in creating a greener and more just world. The challenges for the upcoming months look promising. Now that the Council has determined its position, it signifies that all member states are aligned in their commitment and vision, and negotiations have commenced. Swift consensus is not a common occurrence. In the case of the forced labor ban, we faced a challenging period during Spain's presidency, causing a delay and passing it on to the Belgian presidency, which now holds the reins. But we are witnessing progress. However, progress will not be the same after June 9, the day of the European election results. We sense a shift to the right wing and far right parties, and ideologies gaining substantial support in the polls. And this implies that such legislation may no longer be achievable, legislative processes may be delayed or defunded, and normalcy will no longer be the norm. In the Netherlands, discussions among conservative right-wing and far-right parties about the rule of law, our fundamental principles and values are ongoing. And there are times ahead where lengthy discussions about accepting or rejecting forced labor will be sought. The developments raise concerns. So concerns that we might take a few steps backward, that maintaining progress in these new times means preserving everything we have fought hard for, including the right to, when it comes to asylum rights, children's rights, and labor rights, and so on. So nothing will be the same. Everything will be scrutinized. And I hope I'm wrong. So this is not a gloomy message, but a call to stay vigilant and keep fighting for human rights within the multilateral system and through multilateral cooperation. And in Europe, we feel the strong winds from the right. And as you know, the Dutchies, the harder it blows, the faster we run. And in most cases, also cycle harder. In the coming months, I will use all available means to expedite the process of enacting the new forced labor ban directive, something that will be challenging to reverse. But we do what we must do, and in humanity we trust. Thank you very much.